I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my corner office, the city lights of New York flickering like 1,000 tiny promises below. My silk blouse felt impossibly soft against my skin, a stark contrast to the hard edges of glass and steel surrounding me. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the bitter warmth, even though I knew I had only 30 minutes before the next call would demand my full attention. My phone buzzed on the sleek oak desk, breaking my quiet. A message popped up from someone I hadn't heard from in years. "Remember when you pitched that idea to me? Still can't believe it worked out." I froze, heart skipping a beat, a strange cocktail of amusement, pride, and old hurt twisting in my chest. That someone was none other than my old boss, Greg Thompson, the man who had laughed in my face years ago when I had nervously pitched the concept that now dominated the entire industry. I traced a finger along the edge of the marble desk, remembering that day, the echo of his chuckle, the way my hands had trembled, the lump in my throat threatening to undo me. Yet here I was, in an office that bore my name on the glass, surrounded by people who respected me, my idea, my vision. A flicker of ironic satisfaction warmed me. Maybe it was time to respond. But first, let me savor this moment a little longer. After all, some things are better felt before they're spoken. I remember that day like it was yesterday, though it was almost a decade ago. I was 24, fresh out of business school, brimming with ideas and trembling with a cocktail of excitement and nerves. My hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and I had spent 10 minutes perfecting the crease of my blouse, hoping that somewhere in the fabric, my confidence would stick. The office smelled faintly of coffee and old leather, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing over my head. Greg Thompson, my then boss, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "So, Emily," he said, tapping his pen against the desk, "you think this little concept of yours could actually work?" His voice carried a mocking cadence that made my stomach drop. I swallowed, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Yes, sir. I've run the numbers, done the market research." He cut me off with a laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-throated, dismissive laugh that echoed in the room. "You led this? Honestly, Emily, it's cute. But let's be real. This isn't going anywhere." I felt heat crawl up my neck, my chest tightening like I'd swallowed a stone. My notebook, the one I had scribbled every idea into since college, my little armor against doubt, seemed suddenly so fragile in my hands. I wanted to scream, to defend my vision, to make him see the potential I had seen. But my words caught in my throat. Then came a small gesture that changed everything. My grandmother's old brooch, pinned to my bag, glinted in the light. Her voice echoed in my memory. "Emily, the world will doubt you, but never doubt yourself. Keep your vision close and your courage closer." I squared my shoulders, letting the sting of dismissal morph into determination. That day, I didn't argue anymore. I walked out of that office with a mix of fear and fire, silently promising myself that I would make my idea alive, not just survive, but thrive. And I would do it on my own terms. I remember the first night I set up my little apartment office in Brooklyn. The city outside buzzed with life, indifferent to my tiny world of folding tables and secondhand chairs. My laptop glowed in the dim light, spreadsheets and sketches scattered like leaves around me. The apartment smelled faintly of takeout, and my hair stuck to the nape of my neck from hours of concentration. But in that chaos, I felt possibility. I didn't have a mentor yet, only the memory of my grandmother's words, guiding me. But soon I met Laura Bennett, a seasoned entrepreneur who saw my potential before I even saw it myself. Laura had an office filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, every book dog-eared and coffee-stained, evidence of years learning from mistakes. "Emily," she said one afternoon, handing me a steaming cup of black coffee, "the world will try to shrink you. Don't let it. You have the fire. Protect it." Those words became a lifeline. The early months were brutal. I worked 12, sometimes 16-hour days, surviving on instant noodles and the occasional indulgent latte. There were nights I lay on my couch, staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I'd made a terrible mistake. My hands would shake as I typed proposals, heart hammering with the fear that nobody would care about my vision. And yet, slowly things shifted. My first client was a small boutique firm willing to gamble on an unproven concept. Their excitement mirrored my own, and when the deal closed, I felt my first real triumph. Then another, and another. Each success was a whispered confirmation that my vision had value, even if the world hadn't believed me at first. I learned quickly that running a business meant wearing every hat: marketer, accountant, negotiator, designer, cheerleader, all at once. I faced countless rejections, subtle sexism, and the quiet skepticism of people who couldn't imagine a young woman running something bigger than herself. But every small victory, every grateful client, every positive report fueled me. All the while, I kept my success hidden from the people who had doubted me. My social media was a muted stream of generic updates. My old colleagues had no idea the empire I was quietly building. I wasn't petty. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I just needed to prove it to myself. By the end of the first year, my tiny operation had become profitable. By the third, it was clear that my company had the potential to dominate the market. I watched as my idea, once laughed at in a bright, sterile office, started to grow legs, outpacing expectations and setting trends. The girl who had once trembled in the face of dismissal had begun to rise, silently, steadily, unapologetically. The day Greg Thompson walked into my office, I felt a familiar flutter of nerves, though it was layered now with something far stronger: quiet confidence. He and a few of his former colleagues had come to check in, curious, perhaps, about the whispers they'd heard in the market. They expected to see a small, struggling woman, maybe even someone still figuring out how to make rent, but they were about to meet someone they'd never imagined. I led them through the glass doors of my headquarters in Manhattan. The lobby gleamed with polished marble and modern art. The reception area smelled faintly of fresh orchids and rich coffee. Every detail had been deliberately curated to reflect the journey from chaos to command. "Emily," Greg said, his smirk faltering, eyes scanning the minimalist, sleek office where my name glimmered on the wall in brushed steel. I smiled, letting the silence hang just long enough for him to feel it. The kind of pause that stretches seconds into lessons. My team moved around efficiently, offering polite nods, their professionalism a quiet testament to the culture I had created. "Welcome," I said, finally. My voice was calm, collected, and carried the weight of every late night, every rejection, every tear that had once threatened to undo me. "I'm glad you're here." Greg's eyes flicked to the office view, the skyline sprawling behind me, the energy of the city mirroring the pulse of my company. He looked back at me, trying to read what had changed, only to realize everything had. I guided them to my office, a space both elegant and lived in. Expensive art lined the walls, a library of carefully chosen books stood behind my desk, and subtle personal touches, photographs, trinkets, a bronze version of my grandmother's locket, told the story of someone who had fought her way to the top. "Do you know why I'm here?" I asked softly. Greg swallowed, his voice caught somewhere between surprise and guilt. "I heard about the company. I didn't expect." I let him trail off. Let the unspoken words fill the room: doubt, mockery, and the sting of years past. "I remember when I pitched my idea to you," I said, leaning on my desk, watching his expression tighten. "You laughed. You told me it was cute, that it would never work, that I'd never make it." The room seemed to shrink around him. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again, but no words came that could undo the past. "I'm the CEO now," I continued, voice unwavering. "This company is the industry leader. We set the standard. We dominate the market. And yes, it all started with the idea you laughed at." The silence that followed was electric. His jaw tightened, eyes wide, guilt and disbelief warring on his face. The colleagues who had once shared smirks were now silent, nodding awkwardly, unable to ignore the truth. I let it sink in, the weight of the years, the magnitude of the triumph, the poetic justice. And then I smiled, not with malice, but with the calm satisfaction of someone who had turned laughter into legacy. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment stretch just a little longer. Greg and his colleagues had expected confrontation, maybe anger, maybe a bitter speech. Instead, I offered calm,
Control. Authority.
"You're here now," I said, voice steady. "But this isn't about punishment. It's about understanding the difference between dismissing potential and supporting it." Greg shifted uncomfortably.
I
didn't think. "I know what you thought," I interrupted gently. "And that's why you need to listen." I paused, letting the gravity sink in. "If you want any involvement with me, my company, or my work, there are conditions. First, respect. I wasn't interested in empty apologies. Real acknowledgement mattered. You will speak to every person here, from interns to executives, with the respect you once denied me. And you will listen. Truly listen. Second, accountability. Greg had laughed, yes, but his attitude was part of a pattern. You'll examine your decisions, your biases, and your past dismissals. Learn from them. Stop undermining others to inflate yourself. Third, contribution. My team and my company thrived because of vision and effort. If you want to be here, you will contribute meaningfully. Not just presence, action, ideas, support, commitment. Finally, humility. They needed to understand the weight of underestimating someone. You will leave ego at the door. If you can't, this conversation is over. I watched them take it in, the combination of disbelief and reluctant respect forming on their faces. Their silence spoke louder than words. This was new terrain. They had not faced a woman in this position before, one who had built a legacy from the ashes of their laughter. And yet, I added something softer, a thread of compassion. I've been where you are now in your shoes. I've doubted myself, stumbled, and cried in the dark. But I never stopped believing in my vision. That's what I want you to understand. Not fear. Not regret. Growth. Greg's shoulders slumped slightly, the defiance fading. He nodded, hesitant but sincere. The others followed, a tentative acceptance of the reality that had unfolded before them. I knew power could be wielded with cruelty, but my version, my victory, would be different. Firm, yes. Uncompromising, yes. But also transformational. I wanted them to leave better than they had come in, just as I had become better for all I had endured. This was not revenge. This was evolution. And the rules were clear. Respect, accountability, contribution, humility. Follow them or leave. There was no middle ground. And in that moment, I realized the full weight of my journey. Laughter turned into legacy, rejection into resolve, and mockery into mastery. Weeks passed, and I watched quietly as things began to shift. Greg and his colleagues weren't perfect, but they were learning, slowly shedding ego, embracing accountability, finding ways to contribute without overshadowing others. It wasn't immediate, but growth rarely is. I observed their transformations with the satisfaction of someone who had once been underestimated and now had the power to guide change rather than crush it. I spent a late afternoon alone in my office, the golden light of the setting sun spilling across my desk. The city hummed softly outside, a constant reminder that life moves whether you succeed or falter. My eyes fell on the small bronze locket, the one my grandmother had given me, sitting beside my laptop. I traced its curves with my finger, remembering her words, "Keep your vision close and your courage closer." It had carried me from trembling pitches to commanding boardrooms, from laughter that hurt to triumph that healed. Every sleepless night, every tear, every battle had led me here, to a place of strength, independence, and grace. I realized that victory wasn't just about proving someone wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise, that I could thrive, that I could transform doubt into destiny. My company continued to grow, but so did I. I nurtured the people around me, set boundaries, demanded respect, and celebrated progress. I had learned that power tempered with compassion is stronger than power wielded in anger. And sometimes, the most profound victories are the quiet ones, the ones that change not just your life, but the lives of those who once doubted you. I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the familiar mix of coffee, paper, and ambition. I smiled softly, thinking of every step I had taken, every fear I had faced, every barrier I had broken. And then I whispered to myself, a private vow and a public declaration rolled into one. They laughed at me once, but I am the one who built the world they didn't see coming. The city outside shimmered with possibility, and for the first time in years, I felt entirely, unapologetically, and beautifully free.